let's head on to the next section, which also happens to be the last section for this chapter. So in this chapter, we will be seeing the different causes of poverty. What are those factors that bring about the whole case of poverty? First is you have the historical reasons, that is the British rule. When they started to rule, they exploited the different resources of India, they exploited the labor in India, they took away everything from India, and ultimately we were left with nothing, which ultimately led the people of India to uh, automatically get into the scenario of poverty. Then we head on to the spread of irrigation and green revolution as the second cause. Then we see the third cause as high income inequalities. Then the fourth one is the other socio-economic factors, which I will be elaborating in the future class. Further, once we cleared that, we see the anti-poverty measures. What are the measures that are taken by the government of India to remove the poverty scenario in India? So we can do it by promoting the economic growth in India, and the second one we can do it by introducing schemes. What kind of schemes? We have 5 schemes in this chapter that I will be briefly explaining out to you. So we will be discussing that. Then we have the last bit, very important bit, that is called as poverty and its challenges. So without wasting any time, let's head on to this section. Firstly, what is the first cause of poverty? Historical reason. The low level of economic development under the British colonial administration. Right? Like I've told you earlier, the British rule ruined our traditional handicrafts. They took away the raw material, that is cotton, that is grown here, back to their countries, and they ended up exporting finished cloth to India. And hence our farmers were left with nothing but to wear ready-made clothes. Automatically, when the people in the British are using their factory-made textiles, in India, people are left with no work rather than just produce cotton and send it there, right? So automatically people are left with absolutely no jobs and automatically less income. And during this time there was a high growth of population, and hence when there is high growth of population and very less income, many people will end up falling into poverty. Next cause, spread of irrigation and the green revolution. You may be wondering, once you see this, how did such a positive aspect even lead to poverty? Let us discuss as to how it led to poverty. You should understand the green revolution and the spread of irrigation happened in very few states in India. That can be Punjab, Haryana, Uttar Pradesh, and parts of Andhra Pradesh and Tamil Nadu. And not every state had the capacity to get such kind of irrigation and the capacity to afford the high yielding variety of seeds. So development was limited to very few states. And there were some industries that were cropping out, but how many people can these 2-3 industries even employ? Right? The population is growing, but there are very few industries. So there are no job opportunities, ultimately leading to unemployment. So because of this, people started self-employing themselves, like keeping a small ration shop or working in the construction sector, or you have domestic servants. So naturally, when they self-employ themselves, there is a very less income to support themselves and their family, hence getting into poverty. The third one. The third reason is huge income inequalities. So in India, many things are unequally distributed, such as land is unequally distributed. One state might have different distribution for land, and another state might have a different proportion. Just West Bengal, very few states have figured out this problem for land and have begun begun the process of land reforms, like I've earlier told you, where redistribution of land happened to those who could not afford land or to those who were landless, right? So only these land reforms were taken by only some states and not everyone took it up. And those people who were living in those states where there was no land reforms ended up being in poverty. Then we have the fourth cause, that is other socio-cultural and economic factors. So you must be seeing in old villages, for them festivities and marriages and other religious ceremonies are of a big deal. They tend to make a very big celebration because they want to show to the kind of society that they live in that they have a lot of money. So this has been there since a very historical time in India. So even poor people, if they have absolutely no money, they get onto that habit of borrowing money from money lenders. And like I've earlier mentioned, when you borrow money from money lenders, you have to pay a high rate of interest. So spending on paying that high rate of interest is very hard, and you get into this concept called as debt, where you're not able to pay back that money that you have borrowed. So that ultimately leads to poverty. So, like I've told you, the high level of indebtedness that is there is both the cause and the effect of poverty. This debt causes poverty, and this debt again is a consequence of poverty. Now, let us discuss a very, very important unit called as anti-poverty measures. So, in the Indian development strategy, removal of this poverty scenario has been at the highest priority. So the measures are categorized into two. First being promotion of economic growth, and second being the schemes. Since the 80s, India's economic growth has been one of the fastest in the world, right? The growth rate jumped from the average of about 3.5% a year in the 1970s to about 6% during the 1980s. So you can see the kind of shift. So it is very, very natural that when the economy is growing, right, if when it is progressing, when the graph is like that, naturally people can afford a lot because of their higher incomes. And when you can afford, you afford a basic living, that means you are not below the poverty line. So when there's economic growth happening, there are lots of job opportunities that are there, and hence less amount of what do you call that, an unemployment scenario, right? More job opportunities, that means more people get jobs. When you get good jobs, your income is good, and when you have a good income, you can support yourself and your family. And when the economic growth is happening, when you have the money, you can invest that kind of money in humans in the form of education or medical care. And when you do that, it's again a cycle. When you get good education, you can join good companies, and again you get good income out of it. You can take this route because agriculture is a very, very unexpected area, right? Because in India we cannot predict the kind of rainfall and the monsoons, and it's a very unpredictable sector. But once if you invest in human capital, it is a guaranteed fact that there is going to be a very, very positive return in the future. Also, in the rural areas, many people cannot afford formal education, very good education. They cannot go to very, very big colleges as such. So for them, their only mainstay is agriculture. Despite its unpredictability, you have to stay in that array, the area of agriculture. So now that we know that economic growth is very stagnant in the area of agriculture, we have to look at schemes, the different kind of schemes. That is the second type of measures that we will be seeing now. So let us see some schemes. The first main one being Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Act 2005. So what is the main objective of this act, this scheme? This objective is to provide 100 days of wage employment to every household to ensure livelihood security in rural areas. So this is basically concentrated just in rural areas. So in this scheme, it is proposed that around 1/3 of the jobs that are given out by the government are reserved for women. This is a compulsory mandatory rule. And also the share of the scheduled caste, scheduled tribe and the women percentage in the scheme are around 23%, 17% and 53% respectively. So this point is trying to tell you that the most vulnerable groups are able to get jobs and ultimately get out of poverty. Next, let us see Prime Minister Rozgar Yojana, PMRI. So this scheme was conceptualized in 1993, and what is the main objective of this scheme? The main objective is to create self-employment opportunities for educated unemployed youth in rural areas and small towns. So these educated unemployed youth are not able to find jobs because of lack of opportunities. So this scheme in particular helps in the creation of such opportunities so that these youth can participate in those. So they help in setting up small businesses and small industries. Next we have Rural Employment Generation Program, REGP. So again, this was conceptualized in 1995, and the main object of this program is to create self-employment opportunities in rural areas and small towns. You should know the difference between these two schemes. This has the first scheme, that is PMRI, has a target audience, right? Target group, that is educated unemployed youth only, and that too in rural areas and small towns. But this, they have not mentioned anything specific like that. So it is across the whole rural area and small towns. A target has been created in this particular scheme, that is 25 lakh new job opportunities are given out as a part of the 10th 5-year plan. Then we have the third scheme, that is called as Swarna Jayanti Gram Swarozgar Yojana, SGSY. So this was launched in 1999, and this aims at bringing the assisted poor families above the poverty line. So those that are there below the poverty line, they want to lift them out of that and get them above the poverty line. So how exactly is this process done? This is done by organizing them into self-help groups through a mix of bank, credit and government. So they put these families into self-help groups, and these self-help groups get money from the bank, and they start to self-employ themselves in those from the poor, those from the group. Then you have Pradhan Mantri Gramodaya Yojana. So it was conceptualized in the year 2000, and in this, central assistance is given to states for basic services. What are these basic services? Like primary health and education, rural shelter and drinking water, and rural electrification. So for these three basic needs, a little amount from the center government is given out to the state governments. A certain percentage of money is given out so that the state governments can invest on primary health and education. They can invest on rural shelter by building houses and drinking water by putting in bore wells, and rural electrification by building small kind of dams that they can manage in their areas. So now that we have seen so many schemes, do you think that there has been a result, like a negative or a positive result? Let us discuss. So there has been positive results as well, there has been negative results as well. So let us see why there has been negative results. Because there is lack of proper implementation and right targeting, which means there is no set, except for one scheme. Have you seen the kind of people that they want to ultimately target? No, right? It is a very generalized scheme where you say you are going to help the rural areas and small towns. We cannot assume that everyone is poor in these rural areas and small towns. Some people also might be doing better off than the others, but they are getting those kind of schemes, they're using up those schemes, and hence there is wrong targeting there. And you would have noticed that there are many schemes which have the same objective, right? And the benefits of whatever schemes that have been conceptualized are not going to those people who rightly deserve it. It is not going to the poorest of the poor people, but some people are taking away those kind of opportunities. Hence, a major emphasis in recent years is on proper monitoring of all the poverty alleviation programs. A proper monitoring scenario has to be developed. Next we will be seeing is the kind of challenges that this entire poverty brings about. What are the barriers for our country in achieving anti-poverty? So as you've seen from the different poverty estimates in this chapter, you would have seen poverty has decreased. But despite this decrease, there is still a certain number of poverty. And this kind of number is because there are some challenges. And what are the challenges? Wide disparities is one of the challenges. There is a lot of poverty difference between those of the rural areas and those of the urban areas, and there is also disparity between the poverty levels of different states that needs to be addressed first. And also, like mentioned above, there are very few social and economic groups such as those of the rural casual laborers. Then there are scheduled castes and scheduled tribes that are very vulnerable compared to the other poor people. So they need to be targeted rightly for anti-poverty. Then there is also a very vague definition that is given to poverty line. Not every poor person will understand what a poverty line is, right? So they have to generalize the term so that every citizen in our country understands what exactly poverty means and what exactly minimum level of living means. So what the social scientists are expecting is, in the next 10 to 15 years, poverty reduction is definitely going to happen, and there's going to be a very good progress about it. So this, they are saying, is because of established facts such as there is definitely going to be high economic growth from now to 15 years, and there is going to be universal free elementary education like Suraksha Yojana that we've seen, Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan. Then we have declining population growth, right? Because family planning has started, and everyone has a limited kind of a family, a basic family that is around 4 people, which is good for subsistence levels. And there is increasing empowerment of women and the economically weaker section. So what exactly is empowerment? Empowerment is when the women or the economically weaker sections have the capacity, the capability in order to make decisions as to what they want to do about their lives. Do they want to go out and work in the job market? They can go and work in the job market. So when they have the capacity to make a decision for themselves, they are called empowered people. Mahatma Gandhi always insisted that India would be truly independent only when the poorest of the poor people become free of this human suffering. So, this is a great statement that was given by the father of our nation, Mahatma Gandhi. Eradication of poverty is not just done in one day. You cannot remove poverty in one day, but it is a sequenced process. It is a process that has to be taken place over years, right? It is always moving. Sometimes the development is very high, sometimes the development is very low. So based on these moving targets, you need to figure out on how you can eradicate poverty. But in order to remove poverty, we need to fix some prerequisites, right? By providing healthcare and education, you can definitely remove poverty. By providing job opportunities for all, we can remove poverty. And by achieving gender equality and dignity for the poor, that is definitely a right step in eradicating poverty. So, by fixing these, you are taking baby steps into moving to larger targets.